Hello Internet, I'm the Disney Brain, and while stumbling through scripts of videos I still intend to make, eventually, a recent discussion I had on Discord inspired me to take a closer look at Trakeena, but specifically, what makes her personal story a lot more devastating than I originally thought. And since I never pass up a chance to discuss Lost Galaxy, here we are. So for those of you relatively new to my Ranger videos, or if you haven't had the chance to fully experience my thoughts and feelings on this particular season, let's start by laying a bit of a foundation. The story of Lost Galaxy focuses the majority of its bigger, more important plot points around how individual characters, and in some cases the entire team, cope with loss. We understand how loss drives Leo to be more deserving of the power not originally meant for him. We understand how loss fuels Magna Defender's desire for revenge. And perhaps most notably, we understand how the loss of Kendrix rocks the season to its core, both internally and externally, changing a lot about how the show operates on the back end. Given how often the protagonists are expected to emotionally handle these story beats, it can be easy to overlook how those same narrative principles apply to the other side of the conflict, except with a few major differences that we will, of course, cover. The primary enemies of Lost Galaxy are led by an insectoid tyrant named Scorpius, who bears very little resemblance to an insect, but that's neither here nor there. His daughter Trakeena, importantly, isn't trusted by Scorpius, or really in general, to handle the fieldwork responsibilities that Furio and Deviat usually attend to. She finds ways to manufacture an involvement through some clever means, but nothing that would win the favor of her father more than becoming a full-on bug, which naturally frustrates her to the point of seeking out help. She quickly finds that help through Villainess, who trains her with the goal of obtaining self-sufficiency, and immediately after, she has to contend with her own tragedy when it becomes known that Scorpius is dying. And here's where the really neat parallels come in. Trakeena's personal journey is forever tied to, but also progresses in the exact opposite direction of, Leo's, and their final face-off is a culmination of all the ways both leaders of this conflict, neither of whom strictly speaking should have been in this position, respond to the weight placed upon them. With Trakeena, she almost immediately chooses retaliation, and both literally and figuratively becomes increasingly monstrous on her way towards self-destruction. And this leads to the more specific reasons I think her journey is just as tragic as anyone's, maybe even more so. This breaks down into two major parts. The first mostly concerning her immediate surroundings, and the second dealing with broader outside forces. Trakeena comes off initially as a bratty, unimposing child raised by a destructive father who spoils her rotten. Said father has likely held a position of power for a lot longer than she's even been alive, so to her, getting things her way is just the status quo. Neither the morality of his actions nor that of the environment she was raised in really factor into her thinking, so Trakeena wanting to become generally more useful by simply becoming a stronger fighter feels like the obvious choice from her perspective. Her father trusts in generals that not only have strength and a commanding presence, but also, in the case of Furio, aren't afraid to blow themselves up if it means just a chance to get the job done. Literal self-destruction. Trakeena's desire to become stronger is framed as this adorable mini-arc to re-obtain her sense of value, but I would quibble with what likely comprises her internal musings in these moments, because Trakeena proved her cleverness many times prior to this episode. She even managed to infiltrate Terra Venture, and do so using that beauty of hers Scorpius never found a place for. Her only real mistake there was running her plans through Mike, who has easily the most, for lack of a better term, non-traditional smarts of his team, and is thus the perfect foil to attempted deception. But the point is, Trakeena is verifiably headstrong, and in ways not completely dissimilar to Deviat, but minus the plans for an internal coup. She never really needed to become more physically strong on top of being mentally capable, but everything about her environment told her she did. Everything her father in no uncertain terms wants from her revolves around pure, unadulterated bug strength. Scorpius isn't too far removed from a lot of PR fathers in that respect. We have no reason to assume his love for Trakeena is insincere, but given the fact that he never goes out in the field very often, not since the days of ruining Magna Defender's life, it's not hard to see how much he wants to live vicariously through her. So even though he does care in his own way, Trakeena isn't actually good enough for him. until she becomes exactly like him. The value she places on her beauty, as well as the value that could have come from her differences outright, doesn't matter to Scorpius and the ideologies he lives by. All of these factors mashed together create what we see of Trakeena, someone whose defining elements are gradually thrown away for the sake of straight up fistfights, minion sacrifice, and eventually her final form. And even though her consuming of Deviant by way of the cocoon is an accident in context, it really fits where Trakeena is in the story. She's gotten to a point where she wipes out an enemy faction the second it appears, no questions asked, and Deviant, while conniving, isn't really defined by his bloodlust, which is to say, it wasn't Deviant's direct influence that created a Stingwinger Suicide Squad. What that event really did was accelerate Trakeena's slide down a slope she had already been on, basically since birth. And then, at the very bottom of that slope, Trakeena fully embraces the full power of her insect side, which works as confirmation, in a moment of desperation, that what she thinks she really needs right now is even more power. Because nothing that mattered to her before is here with her now. Nobody that genuinely cared about her at any point is here with her now. All of that has, in some way, shape, or form, been sacrificed. The second half of my larger point presents perhaps an even gloomier idea. So, as I mentioned with Magna Defender, his desire for revenge comes about through the murder of his son Zika by way of Scorpius. He carries those scars for years until he finally has the chance to do something about it. An idea that I have never really brought up in previous Lost Galaxy discussions, but is very relevant here, is just how similar he and Trakeena are. Because the death of Scorpius and the death of Zika are both framed as the incident that led both characters on a path towards destruction, both of self and others, and both of their character journeys end, leaving Trakeena's revenge way off to the side, where it belongs, with them fully tossing aside their initial goals of just revenge. Taking its place is a willingness to expend everything and everyone, all while barely remembering what they were originally fighting for. But the biggest difference between the two is how the Ranger team, but specifically Leo, responds to them. Mike and Leo help guide and influence Magna Defender's actions, giving him just enough inner strength to stumble his way towards the right decision, eventually. But Trakeena is never given the same chance. While we the audience know full well that Deviant orchestrated the events that led to Scorpius' death, Leo still killed Trakeena's father. He states that he didn't have a choice, which is true, but even still, he knows what it feels like to lose a brother. So Leo, more than any character here, should be able to take a hard look at where Trakeena is now and to some degree understand, maybe even empathize. This is obviously not meant as a knock on Leo for essentially not being Cole Evans enough. As a PR character, he's basically the whole package. But it is interesting to me that Trakeena's pain is at no point framed in a similar way as, to use the clear example, Master Org's. Especially since compared to Trakeena's descent into madness, he, ironically, showed far less signs of humanity throughout. Once Scorpius dies, Trakeena's villainy is, in many respects, framed in ways more adjacent to Divatox with a coating of Emperor Grum, as opposed to her spiritual successor in Nadira. But the story of Lost Galaxy still marches forward, with all of its same themes intact, and because of that, Trakeena kind of never has the chance to become anything more than the monster her father prayed she would become. This isn't Turbo, so she isn't allowed to just walk away from all of the destruction she caused with a hearty chuckle. All she can do is continue to slide downwards, unable to question or be questioned about her motivations or well-being. Villainess dying is a hard pill to swallow for several reasons, but the reason that sticks out to me in the context of everything we're discussing is this. The only way he knew to make Trakeena independent was also to turn her into a better, more competent fighter above all else. His code of honor and more welcoming attitude isn't something he thought might benefit her to learn as well. He is, for the most part, complicit with her actions because he's got his own goals, but he only really questions them when her mental deterioration is at its most obvious. It becomes almost morbidly poetic, in a way, when he ends up unable to save something as intrinsically beautiful as a flower before he dies, symbolism Lost Galaxy uses quite a bit, because he couldn't save the beautiful parts of Trakeena either. And when he's standing there, watching a young, innocent child wave at him, appreciative of how divergent her reaction is compared to that of her mother's, he realizes then what matters, and he probably realizes how he might have been able to use that revelation to rescue Trakeena, all with too little time to make any kind of difference. All of this to say that the ways and means individuals rise above their past traumas, their hatred, their goals for revenge, and yes, even their over-reliance on fighting and physical strength as a defining trait, all have their place in Lost Galaxy. But it also conveys very clearly what is bound to happen when rising above isn't a realistic option. It conveys the failings of an environment designed to strip away your chosen signifiers until you literally cannot recognize yourself. It conveys the story of an insect queen that never had the chance to be saved, and likely never even knew she needed saving. And even with how certifiably goofy and incidental a lot of her story moments are, the way she lived her life, and the way it ended, are all just really sad. And those are my relatively short thoughts on the often overlooked Trakeena. Let me know your thoughts down below, and also, since I've started this fun little trend of character-specific videos, let me know which PR character you think would be fun to tackle next, hero or villain. Maybe supporting characters too, but by the very nature of them being supporting, most save Dr. K probably won't warrant a full video. But until then, thanks for watching.